When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject: Where did you go, Alice? User: M00NGGX. Posted February 14th, 1999.
Alice used to answer the phone on the first ring. She was that kind of person. Always prompt, always eager to see what the world had in store for her next. There were qualities I admired about her, and I was far from the only one. People opened up to her easily, though her beauty often caused a lot of them to confuse this easy connection for romantic interest. She was long tired of it by the time I'd met her, yet never allowed it to dim her interest in meeting strangers. She just worked harder at navigating it. In addition to all of this, she was blindingly intelligent. The rate at which she could not just take in and retain information, but synthesize it into new and original insights was genuinely breathtaking. Obviously, I was in love with her. It was hard not to be. I just made sure it never became her problem, and we spent hours together, studying and swapping ideas. You might say I was Watson to her Holmes, an arrangement I was perfectly happy with, and just like Watson, after his compatriot tumbled over the Reichenbach with Moriarty, Alice's disappearance has left a hole in my life that can never truly be filled. It's hard to pinpoint exactly when her interests expanded to esoterica. Easier to explain is why her studies took her in that direction in the first place, owing primarily to a frustration with the rigidity of scientific discourse. There was, she believed, more to existence than could be explained with mere equations. Her observation was that the rationalist worldview was more about establishing dominion over creation than it was true understanding. If there was one thing that defined Alice, it was a need to understand a thing on its own terms, thence expanding outward to its relationship with the rest of nature's intricate web. Like many of her deep dives, this one began with a trip to the local library, whose collection she exhausted in days. Next came day trips to neighboring towns on days when there were no tutoring clients to occupy her time. After one of those excursions, she returned home elated to have found a number of internet message boards, including this one, where users could share their experiences with the strange and unusual. Though there was undoubtedly a lot of poorly conceived fiction threaded in among its many posts, Alice effortlessly sifted through them, finding diamonds among what appeared to me to be mountains of rocks. One contributor, in particular, caught her attention, seeing through their multiple usernames to follow the thread of their contributions. What I read seemed positively fantastical, but Alice was convinced they were true, and her instincts were rarely, if ever, wrong. Further investigation revealed the man to be a private investigator from the Midwest, Andrew Farmer, who had the fortune, or misfortune, I suppose, to be unceremoniously yanked from this world into others. Alice became obsessed with meeting the PI, eventually taking a Greyhound to Midland over the course of a long weekend. Upon her return, she was more determined than ever. In the weeks that followed, the usual piles of books in her apartment became infinitely stranger, some of them in other languages, some written in inscrutable loops and whirls she called Zernish, declining to elaborate further. She started sketching as well, landscapes in charcoal on large swaths of butcher paper. As with most things, the more she worked at it, the better she got, the black vistas taking on more detail. These were places of harsh beauty, including a desert where naturally occurring stone spires rose up over a deserted palace, its sandblasted courtyard full of desiccated plant beds. This, Alice said, was once the home of a nameless kingdom fully in tune with the rhythm of the earth, a hub which radiated stability outward to realms beyond its own. Nothing was known about its fall, she claimed, even though its loss was a key factor in the degradation of many dimensions, including ours. Solving this mystery became her driving force. As her research progressed, Alice became more insular than ever, her reasoning more complex and hard to follow. I helped where I could, but the time soon came when these abstractions outgrew my own understanding. Even with her to guide the way, her illustrations, on the other hand, became even more elaborate until they looked more like windows into a charcoal world. There were times late at night when I would have sworn I could see evidence of a powerful wind disturbing the black scree of that faraway world. For her part, Alice admitted she had been too quick to dismiss calculation as a tool of understanding, with the caveat that it led to places of darkness wherein lurked beings who sought control. Art, she believed, offered a gateway into higher places, ones which held the keys to deeper levels of understanding. With enough understanding, she told me, her eyes afire with passion, healing was possible on a grand scale. And just like that, I understood. To dissect a thing was easy. To create was much harder, and at the end of that narrow, difficult path was a reward far richer than gold: peace. Alice never said goodbye. After several days in which she didn't answer her door, I let myself in with the spare key she had given me. Piles of books and papers aside, her apartment was as spotlessly clean as ever. I would have believed she'd only stepped out for a moment, soon to return, if not for one tiny detail. Her sketches, tacked up on the bright yellow walls, were fading. pictures I'd seen her make in thick, dark lines now grew hazy and transparent. Some were entirely gone. Others, including the Desert Palace panorama, remained just visible enough for me to watch them go. In that last one, among the once verdant garden beds before the great stone palace, I saw a slim figure walking with determination up its dusty steps.
Subject: Pine Hollow. User: BL1M23. Posted March 15th, 1998.
The car died like it had a grudge. One minute I was humming along to some old Johnny Cash Christmas cover, and the next, bam, check engine light, followed by a horrible cough from the engine like it was choking on its own guts. I coasted to the shoulder and sat there with the heat dying fast, staring out through the cracked windshield at the wall of pine trees ahead. Pacific Northwest in winter, wet, cold, fogged in like a damn ghost story. Everything outside the windshield looked like fog and wet trees, nothing else. The air smelled like ice and rot, and I could see my breath even before I opened the door. I tried the ignition once, then twice, but nothing. The last gas station was nearly an hour back, and the guy behind the counter hadn't even looked at me when I asked if this route was safe to take. I remember that now, his eyes locked on the lotto numbers while I talked, like he was trying not to hear me. I should have turned around then. I stepped out into the cold, grabbed my flashlight from the glove box, and looked down the road. The trees were pressing in. You don't notice it on the map how thick the forest gets out here in the Cascades, the kind of trees that seem too tall, like they've seen more than they should. Like I said, everything was wet and heavy, and the fog swallowed the world whole after a few hundred feet. A green road sign loomed just beyond the ditch, leaning hard to the right like it had given up too. Pine Hollow, 3 miles. I never heard of it, but I didn't have a choice. I zipped up my windbreaker, shoved my hands in my pockets, and started walking. The silence out there was different, not peaceful, empty. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of my boots and the sound of breath. I started noticing too much. The town appeared like it had been dropped in all at once. No slow reveal, just suddenly there. All Christmas lights and cheer, but too clean, too symmetrical. Houses with plastic snowmen on every lawn, wreaths on every door, not a footprint anywhere. I passed storefronts with cheerful names hand-painted on glass, Gale's Crafts, Danford Drugs, and a hardware store that hadn't changed inventory since 1973 by the look of the window display. There was a diner at the corner, Martha's Place. Its windows glowing yellow, the only sign of heat in the whole town. I stepped inside, and the bell over the doors screamed sharp and high. The warmth hit me too hard, clinging like breath on a mirror. Inside, 5 people sat at the counter, evenly spaced, backs too straight, coffee mugs in front of them, steam curling off the surface untouched. a woman stood behind the counter, wiping the same spot on the formica over and over again. Her hair was perfect. Her lipstick was too dark. She smiled at me before I said anything, like she already knew I was coming. My skin itched. I asked if there was a phone. She didn't look away when she told me phones didn't really work out here. The others didn't move, didn't blink. The fire in the corner crackled, but it sounded wrong. Too regular, like a loop on a videotape. A cassette player on the shelf behind the register played Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, except it wasn't right either. The tape was stretched, the same lines repeated again and again. The lights flickered even though the hum of electricity never changed. I sat down without realizing I had. A mug slid in front of me, already full. The handle pointed toward my hand. My fingers were cold, and I wrapped them around the porcelain like I didn't have control of them anymore. I didn't drink it, I just sat there, and the longer I did, the less sure I was of how long I'd be there. The bell rang behind me again, but no one came in. I turned. One of the people at the counter hadn't been there before. I would have sworn it. A man in a brown flannel, head down, but I knew he hadn't been there. The tape clicked, rewound, and started again. The song warped. The smiling woman never blinked, and I stood up, said I needed to get back to my car, but she smiled wider and said the car wasn't mine anymore. My stomach dropped through the floor. The others turned to look at me all at once, necks creaking like floorboards. Their eyes were wet, but not from tears, more like something was leaking out from behind them. I backed up and hit the door. It didn't open. I pulled harder. The handle was warm, like it had just been used, but it did not budge. Behind me, the fire hissed. The lights went out, and I turned, and every one of them was standing now. All five silent and still. Their heads tilted just a little to the left, matching like mannequins trained to breathe. The smiling woman stepped out from behind the counter and whispered something I couldn't hear, or maybe just couldn't process, and then nothing. I came to in my car, still on the side of the road, radio dead, pager still blank, but the tank was full and the cassette was playing again. Track 1, perfectly clear. I looked at the dashboard and it was December 23rd, same as before, but the trip meter said I'd driven another 60 miles. And in the cup holder, there was a full mug of black coffee, still hot. I never found Pine Hollow again. The map says there's nothing out there but logging roads and closed trails. But I remember the fire that didn't flicker, the tape that never stopped, and the way that woman smiled like she already had me. And I swear, some nights around this time of year, I hear that goddamn bell again, even when I'm home, even when I'm alone, even when there's no door to open.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.